In this video, we'll introduce the topic of color temperature and the spectrum of visible light. So anyway, I'm just trying to use the basic qualities of light as an outline. So we're on color.
Now, the visible light spectrum contains a range of frequencies of light, which appear to our eyes as colors, from deep red to vivid purple. When a light source contains a mixture of frequencies, it can take on an overall appearance of white light. But depending on the relative amounts of each frequency in that mix, the white might appear warmer, or more toward the red end of the spectrum, or cooler, more toward the blue end of the spectrum. So in photography, we refer to that as color temperature, which we measure with a degrees Kelvin scale.
And your basic traditional color temperature scale from 3200 is the photographic sort of low tungsten incandescent light, up to 6500 is kind of the nominal daylight sun temperature. And you've got different things in between. You can have a color temperature meter, and if you're doing big movies and things, this is what they do, and you can be very, very precise about it. One of the reasons they do that, and it's important now, it was more important a few years ago, but there are certain kinds of lights like fluorescents and LEDs that don't have good color. I'll show you, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but those meters will really pinpoint that stuff and allow you to take care of issues with color spikes and things. But the cameras are wonderful tools that have, and I can't really show you in the viewfinder, but it'll read out your white balance when you do a white balance on almost every camera. So that's a handy way. And then, as with everything in the universe now, there's an app for that. It's interesting. Anyway, this is just going to read out the color temperatures. It's reading it out there, and it's showing you a little bar graph. So even just to get used to what color temperature things are, it's a really handy tool, But if I switch this thing over to tungsten, and then I can go up here and it should roll down. See it going down? 3100. And then if I roll this guy back up to daylight, then you see it come on back up to 6500-ish, so which is what it's supposed to do. So that's handy. The camera is probably the most common way most people that are not doing Hollywood movies are measuring it, but it can be measured with a color temperature meter, and there are apps, and the apps are cool if you're trying to learn, because pointing at something, know what the color temperature is. So tungsten, old-fashioned incandescent yellow light bulbs that Thomas Edison invented. Low color temperature, 3200 is the photographic normal, but they go lower than that. Something like and those came along first. And then somewhere early on in the world, you got these arc lights. The first ones were these carbon arc lights, which is, I've worked on a movie with one of those. It's a light with a smokestack. You got to respect a light with a smokestack. It's got this gigantic arc inside of it. Anyway, those are daylight, so it's like, oh wow, all of a sudden you had a light that could make the color of the sun, which is kind of nice without putting gel in front of it. And then somewhere down the line came along the HMIs, which are also daylight. HMIs are super bright, not a lot of power, and now for everything big, that's what they use. If they're trying to make the sun come through windows, that you get HMIs. And LEDs have been playing catch up for a long time, and they're not up to the brightness of HMIs yet. They'll probably get there, but they're not there yet. And there's some other stuff like xenon they're not used a lot, but they're there. Then you had moving along sort of historically, you had the tungsten and the daylight, and fluorescent also came along a long time ago, and fluorescent was typically in between, like 4300-ish. Problem with fluorescent was it was horribly green, and if you tried to use for photography, you got green faces. In more recent years, the last 40 years or so, they've put a lot of money into really good quality fluorescents. You could buy fluorescents for film lighting, and they were able to coat them with phosphors and whatnot and make them, fix them basically. And so now you can get fluorescents anywhere from the same as any color temperature, 2700 to 6500. And now they're mostly gone now because LEDs have taken over everything. LEDs were the same way. LEDs were invented many years ago. They weren't very bright, and they were like one color at first, and they kept coming up with new colors. They took a long time to come up with the white LED, and then they were horribly green. So it's taken a long time to get them white. And it's only been the last few years you've been able to buy lights like this. But now they'll be any color. So, you know, LEDs are, except for HMIs because of the brightness, LEDs are 95% of what you got now, and they'll probably get brighter and there won't be anything else. But for now, you know, you've got that. But those will range throughout any color temperature. There's a thing called CRI that you'll see on the specs if you're looking at lights, and you know, you can kind of just think of it as quality, because the lower CRI is not going to render true colors. And it's largely because of that spike thing, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But in order to render something true colors, you have to put all of the frequencies, all the colors of light into the subject, and then it can reflect back accurately what color it is. Even if it's overall on the tungsten balance or the daylight balance, that's what your white balance is for. Your eye just switches automatically, but the camera can be white balanced and you get a good color rendition. But if your light source is only putting out part of the colors, you can't get good color out of it. And so the CRI is a measure of the coloring rendering index, a measure of how close to a full spectrum of light a light source puts out. So the sun is a CRI of 100. It puts out all the light. It's perfect. These god-awful things that are slowly starting to go away, that look like, I don't know what they look like, a weird vampire movie, have a CRI of 25. If you ever go into a factory or something and try to shoot under those kind of lights, it is bizarre. You cannot get, you can try a white balance and your skin tone will look like greenish blue. I mean, it's impossible. They do not make anything close to white light. And fluorescents, you know, vary a lot. If you pay a lot for professional fluorescents, they get up to really good quality. But something you just buy for your house, or something you buy in a little flashlight, you know, that's going to have a lot of green in it. Where my keys went, but you know, you hit a little flashlight. Even phones are probably pretty good, but little things that are cheap, you know, usually have a lot of green in them. And so, yeah, high CRI, high dollars. And I will show you a little demonstration here. Slide back this way. Yeah, so there's, you know, there's a person and something white. And now we can turn on a light. Now this light is bicolor. It'll go from daylight to tungsten. And I adjusted it to this other light earlier, so it's about the right color. So that looks fairly normal, right? Right? Does that look normal to you guys? I can't see it very well. You know, the colors look about right. So this is a super cheap light, and it's supposed to be made for doing photographs and whatnot, you know, and it's one of those things, you're out shopping, this is a freaking $4,000 light, which is, you know, except for medical equipment, film equipment is the stupidest price stuff there is. And this is the same light, and it's way, 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 way cheaper. And it's about the same color temperature, because I said that earlier. And you turn it on, and it's about the right color temperature. But I don't know if you can see it on here or not. I can certainly see it with my eyes. But she's pretty green, pretty much. Yeah. Can you see that? And that is low CRI, because these are cheap fluorescent LEDs in there that are making, you know, I may not exactly have the yellow-blue part set perfectly, but you can definitely see the difference in the green content there. Oops, sorry, I got that. You know, that's just, it's pretty dramatic. You know. And one of the ways you control color temperature for artistic reasons or correction reasons is with gel. Less so nowadays if things are correctable, but this is a gel called Minus Green, which is made to take care of the problems with, you know, like if you go into an office and it's got fluorescent lighting and it's making everything green, you can, if you have the time, you can put this gel on them, and it comes in different grades. You know, this is only a quarter. It's not very bright, but when you put that up there, it largely gets rid of that green. You know, it's not perfect, but it's a lot better. So, you know. Yeah. But that's, you know, it's like, you read all that stuff, you're looking at lights, you CRI, this one's 10 points different than that one, and it costs $1,000 more. Well, is that important? Well, it can make a difference, you know. So this is the spike thing I was talking about. If you look at a spectrograph, which is, you know, a graph that shows you, there's a different version of it that shows you the quantity of light in each color for a type of source. You know, you can see that the sun puts out every part of light that you can see. And this is in nanometers, which we don't use, but you know, it's measure of frequency from very warm to very cool. Everything in the rainbow. So it's not perfectly even, but it's pretty good, and it's everything. So if you bounce that white off of something, and the thing is red, it's going to reflect back red. You know, it's not going to reflect anything else back. Relative to the average of the light source, which is 5600, which is why you do a white balance. So everything's kind of calibrated to the light source. When you get, especially a cheaper or older fluorescent, what you get is these little teeny spikes, you know. You get this in the green, you get this gigantic amount of light coming up in green, and they call it a non-continuous spectrum, and you know, another spike, and then you get nothing. So, you know, if you're trying to shoot something that's you know, a certain color of blue or whatever, you're not going to get it because there's no light of that color hitting the thing, you know, and so it's not going to reflect back, and you're going to get something really weird looking. LEDs were about the same for a long time. It's even a huge spike in that thing, you know. And the home stuff is a lot worse because the people aren't taking pictures with it. So your brain and your eyes are phenomenal, and they just instantly adjust to everything you throw at them, and nothing looks odd unless it's really, really off. But the camera's not like that. Something gets whacked out in the camera, it looks bad. So, you know, they've gone a long way with technology lately to make LEDs workable, and they're really good now, but they still have spikes in the frequencies. So just a little bit about white balancing cameras. As we know, we have to white balance cameras, or they might be set to do it automatically. But what happens when you white balance is that you tell the camera that the light you're using as the primary color reference has an average midpoint color temperature of a certain frequency. So overall, the source is 3200 or 5600 or whatever. Once you assign the center of the frequency band to the camera, it renders all of the colors relative to that reference point. It's kind of analogous to how you meter and set the exposure for a camera. When you're doing that, you meter the average brightness, which is what a light meter reads as 18% gray or middle gray. And you assign the exposure settings of the camera to that middle gray, the ISO, the f-stop, the shutter speed. You assign that to middle gray. And then anything brighter than that renders bright, anything darker than that renders dark. Everything's relative to that center point. So with white balance, you're giving it a center point that is frequency or color. That's your reference. So you balance on what's going to be the normal color in the scene. So you want to use something with no chroma, no saturation, like a white card or a gray card. And then the camera takes the red, green, and blue levels and that it's generating from its sensor. And regardless of what frequencies are coming at it from the light source, it equalizes those. So when you put up a white card, it puts out the same amount of red, green, blue. It ups and downs those levels until they're equal and your white card looks white. And then anything bluer than that light source on average looks blue, anything warmer looks warm. And every color looks the way it's supposed to, unless you're going for some kind of a tint look. And the thing is, your brain and your eyes, of course, do this subconsciously, nearly instantaneously.
Your brain just walks in and adapts and knows what white is. And what's interesting is that there are optical illusions that purposely fool you into misinterpreting colors. And if you look at those, sometimes it helps you understand a little bit about how color rendition works.
Some of you might remember the dress that was all over the internet years ago. If you, to jog your memory, or if you don't know, somebody put up a picture of a dress and half the people said it was blue and black and half the people said it was gold and white. And the way I've presented it here might skew the way you see it right now. But some factors that affected the way you saw this, white balance was a huge factor and exposure was a factor. And not just the white balance and exposure of the photo, which were big factors, but the assumed white balance and exposure that in your mind. So what your brain was doing, what your brain was assuming that your eyes were seeing. So your psychological white balance and exposure were affecting how you interpreted what you were seeing, right? So if we go into Lightroom, to me, this looks a little gold and white right now, and that might just be part of how I have this set at the moment. But if I take the white balance tool here in Lightroom, and I white balance on the black section, all of a sudden, it looks a lot bluer. And if I turn the exposure down a little bit too, that helps the effect. And you really you understand, hey, this is how I brought the blacks down a little bit. Well, I can understand how somebody would think this was blue and black. That's exactly what it looks like, probably to everybody with this kind of a setting. Well, what's happening psychologically when you look at the picture as it was taken is, if your brain is adjusted for warm light, say you're outside on a sunny day and there's a lot of warm light, then your eyes are adjusted for warm light. If you assumed that this dress was in a shady area with blue light on it, then you would assume that the areas that you see blue here were blue, and you would see them as blue because relative to the warm sort of white balance of your eyes, they are blue. So in other words, when I started out, it was sort of white balance in between. When I clicked on the black section, what I did was I said this warm area is white. Therefore, that lighter area is going to, relative to that lighter area is going to be really blue. And so now all of a sudden the thing looks blue because relative to the overall white balance, or relative to what your eyes are used to, it looks blue. Now I go the other direction. If I were to take the white balance eyedropper and click on, well, first of all, let me reset it back to where we started. Now, if I take the white balance eyedropper and click on the light part of the dress, and I say that's going to be white, well, now you're going to start to see how the gold and white show up. And I'm going to brighten it a little bit up, and then I'm just going to adjust the contrast. That probably to everybody looks white and gold. So what changed there? We assumed that what might have been in shadow was the correct color. So we took that area that was lighter on the dress and said that's white. Well, relative to that, the darker areas are gold, because instead of having a blue tint, now we're making that white. So when you skew that blue over to white, that skews everything into the warm side. So it takes the dark areas and makes them warmer or gold. So if my eyes are adjusted for a blue light, if I'm in a shady blue area, and I think that dress is in a sunny area, then I'm going to think that white is white, and relative to how my eyes are set, it's going to look white, and the black part's going to look gold. That might be a little hard to grasp, but I'm going to take the iPad and walk outside. So I'm outside, it only takes me a second, I look at this. you know, initially I'm still, because I'm predisposed to see it blue, it still looks blue, but it really doesn't take long before I can start to believe that it's white and gold. And really, I just stare at it for a minute and I can see it. I can absolutely see it white. And actually, after a few seconds, to me, it's white and gold. I don't know if that's going to work for everybody, but I bet it does, you know? Assuming you're looking at the original picture that's kind of neutral to begin with. So let's go inside. So inside with tungsten lights, I hold that up and it immediately, to my eye, looks much bluer. The blue-black, which is my default for this thing anyway, jumps right back out at me. So, you know, clearly white balance is a big part of this. And my eyes being adjusted to a warm light here is affecting my perception of that.
Now, there are so many different ways you can use color to create a mood. You know, here's just a few examples. I mean, you've got this gentleman here, got the blue light, the flare from the back. You know, that's a very rock and roll kind of a look. On the other hand, you've got this man in the middle that's got kind of a sci-fi magician kind of a feel. And the couple on the right, you know, it's got a very romantic kind of a feel. There's so many different things you can do. Sometimes with something that's got kind of a science aspect to it, you can use edge lights and sometimes color in the background to kind of give it that sense of, you know, discovery and research.
And there's another thing, that lighting contrast. If you want the people to feel warm and fuzzy, having some areas that are cool around them really makes it jump out. If everything's the same color, you know, it's not as, it makes the color you want to pop out really pop out.
So now let's move over to the demo area with Tatiana, and we'll try some different things with lights, different color, and see what kinds of effects we can achieve.
This is 5600 and this is what these lights are set at. So that should look pretty normal in terms of color. So if I then change my lights over to tungsten to 3200, so now I'm in tungsten balance. So if you don't, so your eye, you know, it's just so crazy, is that your eye just, especially if these lights weren't here, you just walk into a room and not think anything, you know. And so if, by the way, you want the shot to look really orange, this is one way you could do it, you know. You could just white balance differently. And there are actually, there's a little trick, you know. These cards, and you want it to be warm, you put a blue card up and you white balance to it, however much blue you want, you know. Or if there's green in the shot, you put a green card up and you white balance on that and it gets rid of the green. So it's like opposite of whatever you white balance on is what it tints the picture, you know. It's more of an old school thing, but it's still but kind of the point I was trying to make there is that you can use white balance as a color filter to a certain extent, but even if you did it in post, it really has the same effect. You know, you're warming up the picture. You're changing the white balance. The first class I did a demo with Adobe Lightroom and going in with the color picker and picking different parts of a shot and changing the white balance and see how crazily different it makes it look. You know, so yeah, it is. Even if you're doing it in post, it really doesn't necessarily change the ideas. But so, you know, if you wanted this tint, I'm on a daylight balance still, but if I go down to, you know, there's the camera white balance at 3200. So once again, she looks normal, right? Yeah. I assume. You know, and it's interesting because she doesn't look any different to our eyes, right? But that's what the camera does. Let's say I have, well, let's start with daylight. We do see some coming back there, right? So put this back on daylight. And that's one thing is if you come into a situation that has a certain inherent kind of light color temperature, like that outside back there, and you don't want it to look different, then you want to put your lights in at the same color temperature. If you had a you know, a super bright source back there, you know, you could put, you know, edge light on, and it would be pretty motivated. You know, it would look like it's coming from the window, even though it's not. So I think this doesn't aesthetically do much for me because she's all bright and the background's dark and it looks a little weird, you know. It looks very, very lit, obviously. But if the sun was coming through there and it was blasting out that background, this would look very natural. And it would look like that light on her hair was coming from that window because it's right behind her, you know, and that's motivation. You're motivating that light from something that appears to be making the light, even though it's not in actuality, you know. And so this would be a bright daylight, you know, kind of a scene, and using the color like that. In this video, we'll demonstrate a low-key, warm lighting setup, as well as some other looks. So let's shut the drape. Kill that for a minute. Kill this. So we're still daylight balanced. That's obviously got a really different feel. The camera's daylight balanced, the light's daylight balanced. It's still very normal in terms of color. Nothing odd going on there. But if I were to take this light, say I want something on the fill side, you know, not be just half, you know, half shadow like that. So now I've got a little filler. But I could, you know, warm that. And that changes things, you know. It's just a different feeling, you know. And then I could turn this light on. So I'll make this tungsten. And this is full tungsten. I can certainly go in between. You know, it could be kind of a situation where, you know, you're in a house and there's some daylight coming through a window. You got some mixed color temperatures going on. I don't know what that's doing for you exactly, but it does have a little bit different mood, you know. It's a different kind of thing. Let's see. So I'm going to make this. Let's see. I'll make this not quite as. Make that a little bit tungsten. I'll leave it a little cool, but you can see we had a little lamp back here. That's showing up on the camera. Yeah. Anyway, you got a little something back, a little practical back there, you know. And then, well, now since it's pitch black in the background, maybe this isn't motivated at all anymore. If you had the light back there, it would be. So, you know, maybe she doesn't have any kind of an edge light coming from there. But you might have an edge light coming from where that lamp's coming from. Yeah. So that's a little too bright. Depends on the brightness of that lamp. You could play with the lamp and you could play with the light and figure out what you like. You can make the light brighter. You can make our light brighter or darker. But doesn't that kind of look like it's coming from that lamp? Although in actuality, that lamp's doing nothing at all, you know. But that's motivation. You know, you're motivating the light. And I think you're starting to give this a warmer, homier, you know, kind of a feeling. So talking about that tech thing, this is a little over the top, you know, Halloween costumey, but just to make the point. But yeah, if you were in a lab or something, you know, you might have some things that are sciencey looking or metal or glass or, you know, and those things are nice and reflective, you know. So, you know, you might say, oh, that's kind of a neat feeling. And so then you might want to have something really cool. I mean, you might say that your overall white balance maybe is warmer. So you're going to be tungsten balanced. So there's like a tungsten balance. Now I'm taking my side lights and edge lights and making them blue. But like one thing I like to do, and you see this all the time in TV and movies and things, you'll see really sophisticated, subtle things. That's starting to look pretty Halloween-y, but oh, you made a favor. Hold up that white card and I'll do a little white balance. That'll help. Hold it. Yeah, there you go. Perfect, perfect, perfect. Way too bright. Way too bright. But it does have that kind of, you know, really different feeling. So mostly what I'm varying here is color. What you'll see sometimes is I mean, I think it's really nice. You'll see, you know, a key light, basically, you know, light that's somewhere between this one, which is really like, you know, half of her face, you know, but you can bring it around more and have it wrap around more and be a little bit different look, you know. But you'll have a key light, and then you'll see, like sometimes you'll see a motivated hard edge on the key side, you know, as if there's, you know, and then maybe there's a window or something back there. And then on the other side, you'll see a much softer, like blue, and you know, these aren't formulas. There's an endless number of variations. Somebody does whatever they like in a scene, but I do see stuff like this a lot, and it's neat, I think. You know, you'll see something that's like a dim little blue glimmer on the shadow side of the face, you know, as if it's coming from somewhere else. And it can be a neat, just can be kind of a neat look, you know. Let's kill those background lights, because it's a little bit too much science fiction. I'm getting kind of sick here. A little bit of that. We'll go back tungsten on this, yeah. Yeah, so, and then, you know, another little gag. You know, she's driving a car, or she's working on a computer or something like that. TV, fire, or anything that you might think might make a little bit of light. You know, and you can put a little special there that's supposed to be coming from that source. And these, you can even, you know, these things will flicker and stuff like that too. So you can even, if it's like a TV, you can make it look like they're watching TV or whatever. You know, so it's like she turns on the iPad and then boom, that's way, 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 way too much light. But okay, go ahead. Oh, she switched the iPad on, you know. So we're using color to, you know, get that sense of you gotta try to tell the story, you know. But it's like that shot in the restaurant there, you know. You really, you can really do a lot. You can really do a lot to make something really interesting. So another topic I want to talk about is properly shooting green screen to make believable composite shots. And color is a big part of that, along with some other factors. It's incredibly easy to do green screen. Anybody can do it with no background, no ping. All you do is you go in a Zoom call and you push the button, and magically the background disappears, and you're done. Green screen. It's nothing. There are some issues with that. One is if you look in the corner of somebody's arm and it's flashing and cutting in and out, that's not so great. You know, so if you want to take it up a notch, you know, you actually put a green screen behind them instead of just letting it decide what to take out. And if you want to take that up a notch more, you evenly light the green screen to the correct level and even across a waveform monitor and the right color, you know, and you get all that honed in properly. And now the computer's got something to work with that's even, you know, and can create a good key, can cut the foreground out from the background. And that, you know, you can say is a good green screen. And from a standpoint of superimposing one image over another, that is a good green screen. It can be a perfect green screen. But people can tend to forget about things like lighting and these other things, you know. And I worked with a guy that did Matt's background shots for some Spider-Man movies. They were up on tops of skyscrapers in New York City, you know, and they're not just going out to Shutterstock and finding a pretty picture to throw in the background. They were shooting the background. You know, it was better not to have the actor 100 stories in the air. It gave them a lot more options when they did it that way, but they were creating that background and they were putting just as much care into that as they were the foreground, because matching the two is how you make it work. So if you're gonna be a news station and you're gonna put the weather map up behind somebody, as long as you can do that technical part and have a nice cleanly lit green and a good piece of equipment, you're done. If you're gonna put a color background or a logo, you're done, that's fine. But if you're trying to sell the idea that somebody is actually in a place, then what you're using to shoot the person and what you're using to shoot the place should match, or it's not going to look right. So, you know, if I'm supposed to be standing here in front of the U.S. Capitol and you shoot me like this, and you get a background shot, you know, that was from up high, looking at, it's going to look ridiculous. It's going to look like I'm up in the air or something. Or even if it's just a little off, it's not going to feel right. It's going to feel like something's weird, you know. The focal length, you know, if you know you're shot. Now, some of this you can do in post, but you know, how much if you had a really, really, really close shot of somebody's face, and the back of their face was starting to fall off in focus, and you thought that was really pretty. And then the background was razor sharp. It would look weird. You might be able to fix that in post, but depth of field, contrast ratio, you know, and this is like what we were shooting in your place, but you know, if you got a background with, this is something that's hard to kind of do without seeing it, but when you shoot somebody against a green screen and you're going to put them outside, like on a sunny day, the way you need to light them to make it believable, you would just never think to light somebody like that in a building, because you're blasting a light, you know, like I like to put the sun behind people outside. It's pretty and it just works really nicely. But that light is a bazillion times brighter than you would get an exposure. So now you need to take this gigantic light that's just plastering the person and, like, you know, melting their clothes. I'm like, why would you ever put a light like that in a studio? Because it looks real when you put it against an outside, you know? And like the ratio, the brightness ratio is greater than you would think, than seems normal, you know? But you're trying to match it to what you're putting behind it. The direction of the light, you know, if you know, you look at a background shot and all the shadows are going one way, you probably should put your key light on that side if you want them to look like they're in that light. Anyway, color is the same thing, you know. You know, you'll see, and I've done this myself, but, well, not this bad, but you know, you'll see like a news person out at night. The sun's going down and they're out there, and all they had was the tungsten light, and they turned it on and they're all like yellow lit and the background's blue lit, and it looks like they're green screen, right? But the reason it looks like they're green screen is because they're the wrong color for the background, you know? So matching the color to that. So there's a lot of finesse with green screen, and that's another place where another use of color. And then color for, you know, effect and mood, and we were kind of alluding to that somewhat there, but you know, you could get a million examples of this. One of the things when I put this class together is I figured if I got all the coolest movies and put them up here, that YouTube would leave it up for about a millisecond, and then the copyright people would not let anyone ever see this video. So I've used all of my own stuff in these videos. So I pulled some things that I think have different moods and feelings, and part of which is due to color. So I'll just show you a few clips, you know, because we don't have time to do elaborate lighting right now. This is like a hospital commercial. So that's, you know, kind of a tech. It's got that bluish, you know, that kind of a shot, the green in the background, you know, I mean, it's not goofy looking, but it still has that tech feel, you know, and that's got a real bright, high key kind of a feel to it, you know. So this is like almost the opposite. Low key, moody, you know, warm kind of a thing, you know, so. But I thought the lighting was interesting. And there's a little horror movie with like no color at all. There's a little bit of color in there somewhere, but
was the gain really turned up as high as it looks like it is for these things?
It was up. It wasn't up. I think it's been augmented, but we also took a little light, because this is supposed to be done. This is a found footage thing. It's supposed to be somebody. You see the guy. You know, they come up with all these reasons why we have this footage. So you see the guy with his little camcorder sometimes, but we took a little. You know, black wrap, this aluminum foil basically, and made like a spot about that big for a light that would just like light a little bit in front of you and then just fade off, so you could just sort of barely see what was going on, you know. It was kind of creepy looking, and then, you know, it was kind of like that infrared kind of look.
So sometimes it pays to light the scene poorly to establish a certain mood.
Sure. Yeah.
That's what that was all about.
Yeah.
Oh, not to get stuck on this,
Yeah.
but how do you set aperture? I mean, well, I guess aperture for exposure on a shot like that, where you're purposely.
Well, I mean, you're still just setting it. I mean, you still need enough light to get the exposure.
Right.
You know, oftentimes as a rule of thumb, you know, and again, we talked about the waveform monitor. It's not this camera's not aimed very well right now, but you know that you're generally aiming for the middle ranges on average. But you can certainly have a shot that, geez, you watch movies, you'll have a shot where you can barely see anything, and there's a few little glimmers of light. You know, you can have things that are, so that I'm sure that was darker than normal exposure. You know, so it's to taste kind of, you know. I mean, you know, to some extent you can leave a little of that for post, but I think it's a little dangerous leaving too much to post. You can get in trouble, you know. Then the more dynamic range you have, the safer it is. But yeah, you sit around the monitor and you look at it and you talk about it and you decide what you want it to look like, and then that's what you do. You know, this is another kind of romantic-y kind of thing, but you know, this is just, but there's all the different colors going on. Some of that's, you know, just that was in the store, but you know, the combination of white balance and a little bit of lighting sources, but a lot of it's just available light that was in the set dressing. But it's definitely got a, I mean, that and the hospital commercial, they feel completely different, and a lot of it is color, you know, that's giving it that feeling. And this is another kind of like happy commercial, you know, so it's, you know, hometown, whatever, bright, sunny day, you know, so it's high key, everything's well lit from every possible angle, there's a lot of edges, you know, it's not a lot of, if there's color variation, it's toward the warm end of things, you know.
By edges? I mean, I know what an edge is, obviously, but a lot of edges.
Well, light coming from behind. Well, if you look at Tatiana right now, she's got a nice edge light on her hair.
Oh, I see.
You know, yeah. And so, I mean, and that people use, and I'll talk about this more when I talk about direction. People use a bunch of different terminologies, you know, hair light, edge light, backlight, rim light. I think edge tends to refer more toward when, with a face, you see it on their face, like not just on their hair, but coming across their face, maybe hitting the nose a little bit. But it's a light from behind and the side. She's got a little edge light on there, just I think naturally from the sun, but this has just kind of got a weird, I don't know what you call that, but it's got a little weird look to it. But you know, that's just color grading making this look that way, but it, you know, is definitely, but they're interesting, you know, it's an interesting style. The last thing I want to talk about was how do you control color. This is a good light because it's RGB, you know, so this will do bi-color like these other ones. So you can naturalistic colors from tungsten to daylight, and then it's got an RGB mode where it'll make basically any color. You just dial in a color. So, and those things, you know, have a red, green, and a blue like a TV screen or anything. So, you know, that's variable color instruments is a way to control color. Gels are the old-fashioned way, and they still work. And like those lights, they, you know, weren't bi-color, and they came with different grades of CTO, orange, color temperature orange, you know, to make them all the way down to 3200 tungsten, or in grades up to no gel, in which case it's daylight. There's not nearly as much need for gels nowadays, but there are times when you use them. You know, you're using something that's not a professional light, or it's not adjustable, or for whatever reason, you know. And they came in the color temperature blue, which turns a tungsten light into a daylight light, in grades, eighth, quarter, half, full. You know, different levels of that, in big rolls. You cut them whatever size you need. In orange, which I don't know where my oranges went. Thought I had a stack of oranges here, but anyway, same thing, the opposite. They just take your blue lights and turn them tungsten. And then you've got, for things like those fluorescents and LEDs, you've got what I was showing you back there, the plus and minus green. So if you have a light that's got too much green like that thing, you've got grades, eighth, quarter, half full of minus green, which is a magenta color, and it compensates for that. What's more commonly used is plus green, which might not be obvious, but what happens is you go into a place to light a scene and you've got all these wonderful lights that make beautiful white light, and part and parcel of the scene is some place that you can't change that's got fluorescent lights in, and then they're very green. Well, what you can do is put this on all your lights and match that, and now everything's green, and then you white balance to it, and now it looks normal. So you get rid of the green by making everything green, you know? So there's plus and minus green. And then what we call party gel is just, any kind of wacky color you want to make something for like that stuff back there, the Starship Enterprise. And reflectance, you can bounce something in. You bring something that reflects a color, and this is a natural color. This would be more like a tungsten thing. And now you get some color, can you guys see that? Yeah. Now you get some warm color in, but without changing the light itself. And then, similar to the thing with the TV or the iPad, and this happens naturally, but you can simulate it if it suits your needs. You bring something that's got a lot of color in it. I'm blocking it. You see the red there? I mean, you see, you could put somebody next to a wall or something, and you might use that, So reflecting the light off of something that has some color is another way to get some color. Click on the next video to continue. New videos drop every couple of days. If you like what you see, like and follow us on our social media channels. And everything is downloadable for free on our website, ruchiproductions.com.